everyone, and welcome back to Comic Beyond Dark Tales. In this episode, we're going to be following Morbius, the living vampire, and the story from the Legion of Monsters magazine, number 8, The Madman of the Mansion Slade. So the story starts off where Morbius is basically incognito, where he's rocking a fedora and trench coat, trying to stay out of people's sight. But he's boarding a train, and what he's doing is he's hopping a train to go see a friend of his and to try to find him a cure. So in this, we're taking the story from one of the old horror magazines that Marvel produced called Legion of Monsters. And in this, Morbius has already, experimented on himself, became the living vampire. So now he's searching around trying to cure himself. And it's actually my favorite version of Morbius, where he's just a scientist where something goes wrong. He becomes a monster, and he's desperately trying to find a way back. That's my favorite version of Morbius. I know he's more so been known as a Spider-Man villain in the comics and in the cartoons and stuff like that. But in this, it still could be continuity if you really wanted it to, so it works. But this is one of my favorite versions of Morbius. So he's hopping a train to go find a friend of his, or go to a friend of his to help find a cure for his vampirism. And so while he's on the train, he's trying to rush to get to his train cart that has his room, because he's starting to wig out because he needs to feed, and he doesn't feed on people, so he has like jars of blood with him that he'll drink or whatever to try to cool his nerves and his hunger, stuff like that. And so the train gets him to where he's going, and then he hops a cab to get to the mansion. And he tells the driver where he wants to go, and the cab asks him, he's like, "Why do you want to go to this mansion?" And he's like, "Haven't you heard the stories?" And so Morbius humors the driver, and he's like, "No, what stories?" He's like, "Well, people have been murdered in the woods near that mansion. And they say hunters are being killed by a beast with like red glowing eyes." And so Morbius kind of blows him off. He's like, "No, I don't know what you're talking about. Just drive the car." So the driver takes him. Morbius gets to the mansion, and he gets there, and he's looking for Slade. Slade's the older gentleman doctor, um, Ronson Slade. So he gets there, he knocks on the door. Ronson answers, and at first he doesn't recognize him because, well, Morbius's face is kind of more hideous. He's got his vampire thing going on. So the guy tells him, he's like, "No, it's me. It's Michael Morbius." And so the guy invites him in, and so he's telling him what happened to him, and he's like, "That's why I'm here. I want you to help me find a cure for my problem." So Ronson agrees. He's like, "I'll help you, but I have some things I'm dealing with right now, so I gotta go tend to my own experiments." By then, his daughter walks in, Mary. And so Slade tells Mary, show Morbius to his room. And then he tells Morbius, "I'll talk to you in the morning and we'll get started on your cure." And so while Morbius and Mary, they're walking to go to his room, he hears screaming coming down from like a cellar. And so Mary's like, "It's best that you just ignore that. That's my brother, and he's not well. Like he's dealing with madness. Like he's going insane, and he's gonna be ranting and making noise, stuff like that. So just try to ignore him." So Morbius is curious, and so he ends up going down there to find out what's going on. He goes down there, and they have Mary's brother, Slade's son, chained in a cage, and he's ranting and raving. He's like, "I'm not the monster, he's the monster," and this and that. And so Morbius, he's like, "Okay, this guy, he's got his problems." And so he leaves, and him and Mary go to his room. So Morbius, later on goes to see Slade that night, and he sees Slade with a syringe, like he's ejecting himself with something. So Morbius gets the wrong idea, and he's like, "Are you doing drugs?" He's like, "What's going on?" he's like, yes and no. He's like, this is medicine for my heart. I have a bad heart. And so Morbius is like, okay, fine. And then Slade's like, look, I got my experiments. I told you I'll talk to you in the morning. And he's like, just go to your room. So Morbius does, and he's like, confused. He's like, there's so much happening here. He's like, I don't understand. And so he goes back to his room, and then Mary, he's having the same problem he is on the train. So Morbius is having his hunger problem. And so he's in the middle of dealing with that. Mary comes into his room with a dinner tray, and Morbius, when he got there, he was actually kind of like he didn't want to show his face around Mary, but she got used to it. And so he's trying to hide from her at the same time dealing with his hunger. She comes in there and she finally sees his face, and he's like really like he's going full vampire at this point because he's like hungry. And he actually attacks Mary and he tries to feed on her, but she gets away. And so she runs out the house. And so he goes to chase after her, and so she's running, she's going through the woods or whatever, and she's actually attacked by the creature, the beast, that the driver was telling Morbius about. She's attacked by him, and it's almost like basically like a wolf man. It's like a werewolf type character. Well, Morbius swoops in and saves her, and he starts fighting the werewolf, and they're going at it, and he finally puts it down. Basically kills it, and it transforms back in to Twist. It was her father that was the werewolf. And the reason why, when Morbius went down to the cellar to see her brother and he was ranting and raving, I'm not the monster, he's the monster, it's because uh, Slade was telling people that his son's not well, this and that, he's crazy, he could be the killer though. So I'm gonna keep him locked up. Um, but it wasn't. The whole time it was Slade that was a werewolf that was killing the hunters and stuff. And so Morbius is taken by this. He's like, "Oh God," he's like, "Slade, I've murdered you." And Slade tells Morbius, "You haven't murdered me. You've freed the monster. You've freed me from my curse." And so Morbius is down on his knees holding Slade as he dies, and Mary's there. And so Morbius gets up and he goes to walk past Mary, and he looks at her as he's walking. He's like, "Mary, go home and free your brother of his madness." So basically telling her that go tell your brother he's not going crazy. He's normal. He's fine. Basically go tend to your brother. It's over. The horror is over. And so the story just ends where Morbius just walks away. So I really like this story, and one of the reasons why I like it is because nobody wins at the end of the story. Um, so Morbius isn't. Well, he finds out about the Slade being the werewolf, but he's not able to help him. And on the flip side of that, Morbius went there looking for his help, and at the end, he doesn't get the help he was looking for either. So he has to move on to the next solution to his problem, trying to cure himself. So I like that it abruptly ends to where there's it's not a happy ending pretty much for anybody. And I like that it was a werewolf story. I'm a fan of werewolves. Um and I like that it was almost like a vampire versus werewolf story. I like that. And it was only a few pages. Like I said in my last episode, these monster magazines and fantasy magazines are almost like anthology stories, and each story was like maybe 6 to 8 pages long. Um, so I like that it was also still a short story. So, and the artwork was phenomenal in this. I really like the artwork in this. But again, this is one of my favorite Morbius stories. Very short, really well paced. Everything gets tied up at the end. Definitely a way to check it out. I don't have the actual physical magazine version. I have this in trade. I'm so glad I have it. But I am going to be reading more Morbius stories and stuff like that. I know the movie came out and put a bad taste in people's mouths as far as Morbius goes, but Morbius is one of my favorite characters. I love characters in comics where it was a scientist, something happens to them, and now they're dealing with the problem that now they're a monster, or they're a creature, or they're this, or they have this superpower now, or whatever. So I love, they don't really do it much anymore, but I love back in the 60s and 70s when all this stuff was being made. I love mad scientists when, they get cursed with this, you know, again, transformation, or they end up with this ability. I love the whole mad scientist gimmick. So, that being said, that's the story. This episode did run a little bit long because I'm ranting, but it's just one of my favorite Morbius tales. So that's why I'm ranting. But that being said, I hope you liked this episode. If you did enjoy it, please subscribe. And there's gonna be more creepy creature stories coming. We're hitting the month of October, one of my favorite months, and I'm gonna be pulling out all the old creature feature stories. So stay tuned for that. And until next time, I'll talk to you later.